Hi, so we have with us today Mr. N S Vishwanathan, who's been associated with central banking for almost close to 4 decades. He's the ex-deputy governor of Reserve Bank of India. He's been associated with SEBI and the Indian Institute of Management in various degrees. Sir, we are more than pleased to have you. Right off the bat, the first question, I think the market is also looking for an answer, and I think all of us over here, the last month's reading of inflation was kind of a little surprising. They jumped from below 6% to almost close to 6.5%. Uh, Contextually changed the whole expectation from the market, right? I mean, people were expecting the rate hikes to be paused, the Feb meet to be the last of the meets where you continue to tighten, and the body language of RBI to kind of change. And that was kind of a surprise. In your view, sir, in your experience, what's the way forward? What do you think?
So, I think if you go through the minutes of the MPC, there are two, three things that are very clearly emerging. One is that even when there was a fall in the inflation, CPI inflation, RBI found that to be largely based on reduction or disinflation in the price of vegetables, which was very seasonal, and believe that that could kind of again jump back once the winter is off, number one. Second, two, they found that the core inflation is still sticky. Okay. And third is that, there's a very clear understanding in RBI, based on the language that you can see from the minutes, that RBI is looking at the target rate, not the band. Okay? So if you look at all the four members who voted for the 25 basis point increase, they've said that we want to move towards the target. Okay? So which means that because they have said that the context of the likely inflation CPI going down to about 5.5 next year. Okay. So the way I look at the forward, that RBI will still target to get to 4%, which is what they will at least be the medium term objective be, number one. Number two, I think we have to look at how the CPI will move once these seasonal fluctuations in the price, which have a big impact on the CPI basket, when they turn to be more neutral, to weather conditions, how the CPI actually readings will be is very important. Last is, of course, that if you saw the minutes, it's based on also the inflation expectation surveys that they have done. So there's a fair bit of feeling that this will kind of continue. That's the impression that the surveys have given RBI. And the job of monetary policy is more than anything else to contain inflation expectations. Okay? And while the minutes do say, I think Dr. Patra, that some of them are maybe linked to immediate events, there are things that can keep happening, and therefore I think RBI will, in my opinion, so I would be surprised if there's a pause
Even post-April?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a fair point, sir. But something that has been talk of the town is that when you benchmark the repo rate now with the inflation where we are today, and even the core inflation where we are today, we've already kind of reached a neutral territory, right? And now post-April, the base effect also starts coming in, which should ideally help a little bit. In your view, sir, how far do you think RBI will go as far as the policy rates are concerned in terms of bringing them into the positive trajectory? Is it going to be plus 50, plus 100, or do you think that there is no context of a target rate in mind, but it's more contextual to inflation in itself?
I would say, I think the official position, that's fact as well, is that RBI does not talk in terms of a particular amount of positive interest rate at all, number one. And obviously, RBI's the mandate of Monetary Policy Committee is to contain inflation in the 4 to plus or minus 2 band, consistent with growth. Okay, so I think I think again, if you ask me, as Dr. Ashima Goyal's observation, the minister will talk of the real rate being already in the positive territory. But I think that's not exactly, the target is not, obviously from a savings perspective, you want a positive interest rate for the savings, that's one thing. But I think RBI does not have a quantum per se. And if you say, I'm sure if you have read the earlier, RBI used to do this analyst post and policy analyst discussions, there also RBI doesn't target
real policy
rate as such. It will be therefore informed by how it reaches the inflation target.
Now, a very interesting factor that played out recently in the last 2-3 months, which most people were not kind of expecting, is the China reopening situation, right? And at some point of time, there is a very distinct possibility of that driving the global inflation back again, because as and when US stabilizes, commodity inflation will start coming back into the picture. Is that something that has you worried from India inflation and policy rates perspective, sir? Or rather, the way I would put it is that would that be a factor to watch out for?
So RBI will obviously, the factors that impact rate decisions are domestic and global factors. Okay, there's a reading of the macroeconomic, global macroeconomic factors and the domestic factors, and how the global macroeconomic developments can feed into the domestic economy, and therefore that gets factored into the overall policy rate action. And therefore obviously, I believe the Monetary Policy Committee, whenever it meets next, will take care of, take into consideration those developments. The other part, of course, is that at least going by what we see or hear in the media, US is still going to be in the I think upward trend in terms of interest, because I see people talking of 6%.
Yes.
So I think many of the things will also have an impact on. Obviously not going to match with what they do, but I think all those elements will have an impact on how the Monetary Policy Committee takes a view on things.
So, just while we are on the global context of things, are you surprised with the way Fed has behaved as far as the tightening policy is concerned, the intensity and the speed at which they have moved? And what do you think from Fed's perspective is the way forward? Because obviously a lot of our monetary policy is dictated by what Fed does, because currency management, comes into the picture over there as well.
So I think the point with Fed is saying is that none of this tightening that they have undertaken so far has yet seen an impact in real economy. The employment data, consumption is still continuing to be strong. So that's one of the things that they are worried in the sense that the monetary policy rate hikes have not had the desired level of impact yet. So I think for them, inflation at present is obviously the most important concern, because growth is not.
Correct.
And I believe therefore that I'm not. If you ask me, the central bank's languages and thought processes are always contextual. You can't therefore say that somebody is a hawk or a dove all the time. Okay? So I think if the situation warrants, and it does warrant in the case of US, they will continue to hike this. I'm honestly not surprised. Maybe at some time, people will think of the language of Mr. Powell. Earlier it was seen as a little dovish, little more supportive rather than. But I think ultimately, central banks will go on facts and data that is there, and therefore I'm personally not surprised with what they're doing.
And so I know it's very difficult to take a call going forward, but all things remaining constant in the way things are today, any possibility of a rate cut happening from RBI's perspective in this current calendar year, the way you see things today?
If I go by the language of the last resolution and minutes, I don't see. Okay, a pause might be itself, something that we must watch whether that happens, because obviously the language is talking in terms of getting inflation to the target rate.
Yes.
Not keeping it within the band.
Absolutely.
So I'm not. I wouldn't be surprised if there is not a rate cut.
And would you expect a longish pause, sir? Probably 6 to 8 months, you see the kind of steady systemic effect of inflation cooling off before you decide to cut rates. So fair to expect a longish sort of a policy rate pause?
So I'm only seeing the language.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Monetary policy.
Absolutely.
So I think if you saw the tail piece of Governor Das's personal comments, he said there was this question on will there be a forward guidance. Okay, there has been lack of it, and he said that in an uncertain world, we can't give any forward guidance. All that we can do is that we will deal with what is required to be done. So I think given that when the governor can't say what and obviously they can't,
Yeah.
because if somebody gives a guidance, this is what is going to be, then markets will factor those and
Hold them accountable to that.
Okay. So I think in a world where there's so many external factors, which are not even in your domestic control, let alone RBI's control, that will inform how things will move going forward. I wouldn't hazard a guess on how. I mean, the only thing I can say is that in the kind of scheme of things, the language that is there, a rate cut is absolutely not there. Is how we say, unless you don't know if things can go awry, suddenly, because some of the developments can be too fast.
Correct.
You want to know, but
like what we've seen in the last couple of days.
Precisely. So I didn't want to mention it, but
yeah.
The one thing is that unless there's something very surprising, okay, so we talk of in economics, we of ceteris paribus, right?
Yeah.
So I see that something's going on.
Last question. Given the way rates have moved, it's very counterintuitive. It's very surprising the strength of consumption in our domestic economy, right? When you look at the housing data, when you look at the car sales data, some of these larger discretionary consumption sectors which are more hinged on interest rates, right? EMIs have obviously now started moving. Those which have not will move by the end of March, April, right? What is your view on this current consumption scenario, and when do you think we reach a tipping point where consumption starts slowing down, the overall credit growth in the economy kind of starts taking a slowdown, and the overall GDP growth rate might be at risk? Do you think it's still a little far away, or do you still think that we are comfortable where we are given the strength of the data? Just your own personal view on this.
So I'll understand two ways. Number one is that it's a known that many of the monetary policy, particularly rate actions, take a long time for them to actually seep through the system and really start taking the direction that you expect them to. Which is exactly, I think, what Dr. Ashma Goyal has mentioned also in her minutes, observation in the minutes. Okay, but I believe that there are some segments. So a lot of things will also will determine on what government is going to do.
Right.
Okay, so the government's expenditure plans will be another element that will determine some of these things. So if you ask me, there's a fair bit of expenditure planned by the government, even while there is effort towards fiscal consolidation as one would see it. So I would therefore say that it's a function of not just what the monetary policy actions are, but what the fiscal side.
Correct.
Government actions will
take a kind of 360-degree holistic view on it.
Yeah, so I would say the government does what all it plans to do, so you still could expect a fair bit of growth taking place, and if it happens along with a decent amount of fiscal consolidation, it need not be necessarily very inflationary.
Sir, it has been an honor and a pleasure having you here, and on behalf of everybody here in Ambit, I would like to thank you for sharing your views with us. I'm sure our viewers have gone back wiser after this conversation today. Really, thank you so much for coming today, sir.